this Sunday, 9:50 on Channel 4.
Bestows its sad refrain.
John Lawrence brutally attacked in his flat at Warpaway, Isleworth, and left to die.
He was last known to be alive on the Sunday afternoon at about 4:40 when a friend of his telephoned him. One of the neighbours on the Sunday night about 10:30 did see two young men in their early 20s to the more or less behind me, and one of them was crying and being consoled by his friend. There was a compact disc player which was Lasky's own make, Nesco, which is rather unusual.
Do you know someone who has recently acquired a Nesco compact disc player in suspicious circumstances? Did you see John Lawrence between Sunday the 7th and Tuesday 9th of February? Ring Crimestoppers on 0800 555 111. Your call is free, you don't have to give your name, and you could earn a Community Action Trust reward. If you have information on this or any violent crime, call Crimestoppers.
On Aspel & Company this week, George Harrison and Ringo Starr together on television for the first time since the days of the Fab Four, along with Thelma Barlow, alias Mavis Riley from Coronation Street. Aspel & Fab Gear Company, Saturday at 10:20.
You're watching LWT, now the news from ITN at 9 o'clock.
The news from ITN.
Police and mourners clash as the IRA bury their bombers. Thousands march for more money for the health service. Mrs. Thatcher says the budget is about taking, not giving. And a Thorburn late penalty gives Wales the Triple Crown. Good evening. Police and mourners clashed at the funeral of a top IRA bomber today. The RUC moved in with batons when masked men in an IRA colour party lifted the coffin of Brendan Burns at Crossmaglen in South Armagh. Burns and another IRA man, Brendan Moley, died on Monday when a bomb they were carrying went off prematurely. Moley's funeral went ahead quietly.
There's been a massive security force presence all day as the police and army have tried to keep tight control of the two funeral parties. Brendan Burns was buried first, his coffin carried by his sisters from the family home. He and Brendan Moley had been killed by their own bomb on Monday, less than a mile from here. In an attempt to evade the police escort, the hearse turned away from the route the police say had been agreed. Police tried desperately to regain control. Some took to the fields, and a series of scuffles broke out as the mourners tried to block the road, and the police used their batons to clear the way. Eventually, the car carrying the coffin did escape without an escort. 5 masked men carried Burns' coffin from the church. He'd been wanted by the police in connection with several murders along the border. The police moved in fast. They used their batons as the crowd blocked their way to allow the IRA men to escape. Missiles were thrown at the police, and there were some injuries. Helicopters ferried soldiers across country to Brendan Moley's funeral. Then the mourners and security forces walked 4 miles from his home to church in Cullyhanna. This funeral passed off without serious incident, but at the graveside, an unidentified man said the IRA would shortly be leaving the security forces much more than just a calling card. David Rose, ITN, South Armagh.
There are reports tonight that a man has been arrested after an explosion at a farm near Kilrea in County Londonderry. Another man who was injured has been taken to hospital and is said to be in a stable condition. Police are continuing their investigation. The TUC says up to 100,000 people marched through central London today to demand more funds for the health service. There were also demonstrations in Birmingham, Leeds and in Stirling. In London, the TUC General Secretary, Mr. Norman Willis, again called on the government to set aside cash for the NHS in the budget. But he was heckled by a small group of health workers who wanted to put their case for a general strike on budget day.
They arrived by special train. They arrived by London bus. They came in their tens of thousands to back up the TUC call for a minimum of £750 million emergency aid for the health service. The government this week dismissed a call from a Commons Select Committee for more money. and the government have consistently refused to promise to fund any pay award recommended by the nurses' pay review body. The nurses' mascot, a Florence Nightingale lamp.
I hope she won't be turning over in her grave. I hope she'll be given great confidence by the way we're actually trying to protect the National Health Service.
TUC General Secretary Norman Willis said he hoped the turnout would show Mrs Thatcher how people loved the health service and hated what the government was doing to it. Even the police couldn't dodge the support the NHS badges. But once in Hyde Park, marchers found no nurses were asked to speak. The TUC said that's because the march was for all unions and not just health workers. Tempers rose, though the scenes were confined to the front of the crowd. And after the official speakers had left, the more militant demonstrators took over the platform, calling for an all-out strike in the NHS. The rest drifted home, most completely unaware of the scenes near the platform. Sarah Cullen, ITN, Hyde Park.
Mrs Thatcher was under a mile away from the demonstrators, telling Conservative councillors that those who thought the Chancellor had money to give away were wrong.
Believe you me, he hasn't. He hasn't got a penny piece to give away. Budget time is not about how much he gives away. It's about how much he takes away from the taxpayer.
She bitterly attacked those who she said judged morality by how much was taken from the taxpayer.
It's so arrogant, it's so calculated. It's an attitude born of the view and based on the belief that it's the citizen's job to serve the government and not the government and local government's job to serve the citizen.
She was just as forthright in her defence of the community charge or poll tax, which she said would give ratepayers a ready reckoner by which to judge their councils.
Because if they're paying more community charge, it's either because they've got more extravagant services or delivered with a less efficiency of management, and that's why they're paying more.
Mrs Thatcher's words are the first shots in the campaign for the local elections to be fought by these councillors in May. Peter Allen, ITN, Central London.
The first opinion poll carried out since the formation of the new Social and Liberal Democratic Party puts it in third place, well behind both Labour and the Conservatives. The Harris poll in tomorrow's Observer gives the Conservatives 47%, Labour 36%, the Democrats 12%, and Dr. Owen's SDP, which intends to keep the original party name, just 2%. Efforts to secure the early release of the kidnapped British Oxfam official Peter Coleridge seem to have failed. He disappeared in Sidon in southern Lebanon 2 days ago with a Syrian colleague. Reports that he'd be freed today turned out to be false. Lebanese security forces say he's being held at the Ain el-Hilwel refugee camp by the extreme Palestinian faction Abu Nidal, although they deny that they're involved. Here, an Oxfam spokesman said they would just have to keep calm and keep hoping. Israeli troops have shot dead 2 more Palestinians during continued unrest on the West Bank. The 2 were killed during clashes between demonstrators and soldiers in the village of Dahariya. The family of a salesman who killed himself after being told to work harder is thinking of suing his employers. An inquest heard that 53-year-old Malcolm Hunt was found dead in his fume-filled car the day after he was reprimanded for taking time off to celebrate his 30th wedding anniversary. Now with news of Wales' rugby triumph and the rest of today's sport, here's Giles Smith.
It's 9 years since Wales won the Triple Crown. In Dublin today they managed it again, but only just thanks to a Paul Thorburn penalty in injury time. The final score, Ireland 9, Wales 12. In a disappointing Calcutta Cup match, it was Scotland 6, England 9. Wales went to Dublin with stylish wins over England and Scotland under their belts. And to begin, a Kiernan penalty gave Ireland a 9-3 half-time lead, and the Welsh needed some encouragement. It seemed to work. Unlike their last 2 matches, it was the forwards doing most of the attacking. Eventually held his nerve to set up Wales for the Grand Slam against France.
This week, inexpensive holidays in France, what the Soviets call the Russian Riviera, and the Welshest part of Wales.
Hello, I'm at London's Gatwick Airport, now the second busiest international airport in the world.